So welcome everybody to the TERMIS SYS Europe interviews with a scientist. With these interviews, we want to briefly portray the variety of profiles of young scientists in the TERMIS community. Today we have Miguel Castillo. Hi, Miguel.
Hey.
And we would first like you to introduce yourself in some sentences.
So, thanks for the invitation, first of all. It's nice to be here with you. My name is Miguel Castilho. I'm an assistant professor at the Medical Center in Utrecht and also at Eindhoven Technical University.
Thanks, Miguel. Can you tell us about your work, what you're working on at the moment?
Yeah, so basically I'm focusing on materials design and processing to generate living tissues for regenerative medicine applications. A particular focus of my research is on using 3D printing as a traction force to generate these living tissues. Not just for regenerative applications, but also as models to study interactions between cells and materials. So in a nutshell, it's basically this.
Of course, we're doing all of these interviews online because of the unspoken pandemic. We would like to ask you how this current situation has affected your day-to-day and your group and your research.
Well, actually, pandemic was really a hard period for all of us, and we are still facing some of the challenges due to the pandemic. In our case, we had a couple of PhD students that were finishing their projects, so it was particularly hard on them, as well as for international students that were visiting our institution. So for the PhD students, what we did was we had basically to prioritize works and really be critical on the amount of time that we had available in the lab to finalize the experimental work and then try to wrap up everything and write a thesis. For the international students, it's quite unfortunate that some of them had to return to their home countries. In some cases, we managed to change the focus of their research from more experimental towards some computational work when it was possible, or a writing assignment. So somehow we managed to find alternatives to not be able to be in the lab. But somehow the situation here, at least in Utrecht, was really well handled. We were able to be in the lab at an occupancy of 30%, which was not a lot, but it allowed to be, for example, 1 or 2 days in the lab every week, which was quite important, at least for, as I mentioned, for the PhD students that were finishing their projects, and for some projects that we were really at the last bit and we had to deliver work. So it was hard. I think we will still feel the consequences in the future. We are still facing that now, but somehow we managed to find alternatives, which is basically what we do every day as a scientist. So
thanks, Miguel. And can you tell us about your academic experience? Where did you do your PhD, your first postdoc and other postdocs? Can you tell us a bit more about this, please?
Yes, so basically I did my PhD in the University of Lisbon in an Institute Superior Technique. And it was a collaborative project with an institution in Germany, in the University of Würzburg. So I spent some time during my PhD there. And I finished my PhD in 2015. Then before actually finishing the PhD, I started a postdoc in Utrecht, already in a collaborative project between the University Medical Center in Utrecht and then the Technical University of Eindhoven, where we try to actually bridge between the technical sciences and the biological sciences. Then in 2018, I became an assistant professor at a medical center in Utrecht. And then recently I started a part-time position at the Technical University of Eindhoven. So basically I split my time between the two institutions, and then I split time between research, teaching duties, and then managing your own research group.
So now that you're mentioning your group, what's the size of your current group, and what would you prefer to have? Such a like a big group of 20 to 30 people, or a smaller group of 5 to 10?
Yeah, so I'm still at the early stage in that sense. So my group has, I would say, 3 PhDs and 2 postdocs directly working with me, and I'm part of a larger group. So I'm not fully on my own. Some of these PhD students are actually shared with the PI above me. So it's still a smaller group. I have a preference for smaller groups because I believe you can provide more of yourself in interaction with the students. It's more frequent, and I really like that part. I really like to spend time in the lab and dedicate time to do science, and not spend too much time on bureaucracy. Unfortunately, that takes a significant amount of my time now, more and more. But my preference is for smaller groups. I would say 5 to 10. 10, it's already a larger group. So.
Thanks, Miguel. And can you tell us about how are you managing your group? Are you using lab meetings? Are you using one-to-one meetings? And during the pandemic, did you kind of develop the sense for using new softwares and managing tools? I don't know, Slack, Trello, or whatever, also to track your own work?
Yes, so basically the way that we work is that I have a one-on-one meetings with all the members that we organized bi-weekly. So I always reserve a time slot to discuss to master student, PhD, postdoc, research technician. Everyone has 1 hour with me every 2 weeks to discuss their progress in all the aspects, not just about science related. It's really an hour for them. And then I try to be in the lab as much as I can. I really like the hands-on. So the daily supervision, I actually do it myself. Sometimes you have, for example, for a master student, you have a PhD that more closely work with them. But I try to be there as much as I can, not just because I like, but also because I believe that it's quite important to have this contact and not lose this contact with all your team members. So that's why I have managed, or I still manage the supervision. I now have less time to be in the lab, so I move a bit towards these bi-weekly meetings, and I try to replace my presence in the lab by, for example, weekly meetings when I cannot see, for example, for 3 or 4 weeks I cannot be in the lab. I try to at least create room in my agenda to meet with everyone. How I manage if I used other software during this pandemic period to not really. So some of my colleagues are working the Trello, I think, to just create a proper agenda and then keep track on our activities. On my side, it's working okay with these regular meetings with all the team.
Okay, and in terms of sharing your work, so obviously most of the results we share by publications, but maybe for the more wider public, what kind of ways do you do to disseminate your work?
Well, actually, it was an aspect that until some years I was neglecting. I'm not a fantastic disseminator, or how you call it in proper English. But I see how important it is to disseminate your results, not just for the sake of getting citations, but more to reach out to others and really bring your knowledge to other colleagues in fields that might benefit from what you are doing. And if you are just closed in your box, in simple words, you can do fantastic science, but it's never coming out and probably never reaching out to to actually can use it and translate it, for example. So what I try to do now is to use more often the social media like Twitter and LinkedIn to try to post the papers from the group. I also try to more often contact these. So each institution has department that is responsible to disseminate the results of the institution. If there is a grant, if there is a breakthrough in the group, and I try to reach to them more often. Of course, we always believe that each single paper deserves media attention. So I think I was contacting them too often in the beginning. Now I try to be a bit more critical, but it's basically what I try to do now. So LinkedIn and Twitter, so using the social media more often, and then use the infrastructure that I have around me to help me disseminating the results.
Thanks, Miguel. And we wanted to ask you, what was your first fellowship grant? At what stage did you apply? What was it about? And if you asked for help for to your PI at that time, did you ask for any feedbacks? How did it go?
Yeah, so actually my first fellowship was my PhD scholarship. Because in Portugal, actually, you write your own project and then you apply for a funding institution. So actually, it was my first one. And of course, it was a collaborative effort between my supervisor and myself. So actually, the idea came from him, but I did most of the writing. So that was a fantastic experience because it was something that we wrote together. And the idea matured during the writing process. The first grant as a PI was during my postdoctoral period. So I started in 2015, and in 2017 we got an Eurostars grant with my PI and the company. These are a bit different funding schemes because they are meant to, so they are projects in collaborations with the companies that are not just focused on basic science, but also on bringing product to the market. So there is money assigned for that. It was kind of a challenge in the sense that you prefer to do basic science, and companies are always driven and pushing towards using the knowledge to make a product, bring it to the market, and publications is actually not their business model. So it was a fantastic experience. This Eurostars, actually, it was the first grant as a PI when I managed to learn quite a lot on managing expectations between the different partners. And it was written also in collaboration with my PI and the other consortium members.
So now that you are talking about managing expectations, how do you deal with this numbers game of having to apply for, I don't know, 10 different grants in order to get just the one? How do you deal with this, and how is it getting better now with time, or is it still as frustrating?
I confess, for me, it's always a frustration, especially when you dedicate such amount of time on preparing something, receiving a negative answer that your proposal cannot be funded. It's always frustrating. I will not neglect that. What I do a bit better now is try to use more effectively the time that you dedicate for writing the grant and the results, because usually you get quite nice feedback from the reviewing process that helps a lot to improve your grant. So this is one aspect. And on the other aspect, it's I try to adapt my mindset to it's never a waste of time. Whatever piece of work that you write down, if it's not for that grant scheme, you will use it later on. And for example, it already happened with me that you change the core of your idea, it's already on paper, and then you submit it once, and you keep improving that idea, you keep building data, and then after 2 or 3 years, it's already a piece of diamond that you have been polishing through this submission and rejection phase. So it's never a waste of time. I still get frustrated with a no, but I handle a bit more better in the sense that I try to look at it as an experience and then try to improve it for the next grant application.
Thanks. And what would you say to your past self when you were a PhD or postdoc? At the moment that you're at right now, what would you suggest to Miguel of the past about research, about grant writing, about academic experience?
Just try earlier. Don't wait too much until you get a piece of diamond in your hands. Just write on paper something that you feel that it's a good idea, submit it, and then you will get some positive feedback sent to your peers, so they always provide some nice feedback on your grant. I know that there is a sense of competition in science that we need to hide from others what we are doing, and somehow it's a bit conflicting because you don't want to share your precious idea with others, because if you share it, you will lose it somehow. But I don't find that it's the approach that I like to pursue. I really believe that in such an interdisciplinary field like regenerative medicine, that you have material science, you have processing, you have computational modeling, you really need to share your ideas and then get input from others. So I would tell to my past Miguel, try earlier, and then not just paper, but also grant applications, try earlier.
Thanks for that. Now maybe changing gears a little bit in terms of how you manage your personal life with work, and how easy is it for you to really maintain a healthy work-life balance?
Well, the idea is to be honest, right? So I think I'm not a fantastic example on that. I'm still finding the best way to manage my time. So the balance between work and personal life, it's still not there, I confess. The positive thing is that I like what I do. So I like not the bureaucracy and handling the grants and then doing the budget, but the science itself, the process of studying, understanding what is going on. It's never a waste of time for me. So there is a lot of time that you invest on yourself, and that you these are hours that you are investing, right? But you do it because you like it. So if I give you a number, typically I work between 10 and 11 hours per day. So it's a lot. If you feel that what is the time for your personal life, it's not there. But somehow I like it. I don't like the bureaucracy, the bureaucratic part, I confess, but the studying part and the research I do like. So so answering, I think I'm not a good example on that. The balance between the work and personal life, it's still not perfect. I believe that I have to definitely improve on that. There are colleagues that manage that way better than me. So I know that they only do emails during this period. They do research from 8 to 1. So they really organize well their day. I'm not a fantastic example there. There's still a lot of room to improve in that sense on my side. And I'm just afraid that it won't get better because work is still just piling. So I don't know where this will end up.
Thanks for your honest opinion, Miguel. We wanted to ask you, since you moved from Portugal, well, you did your PhD partially in Germany, and then you moved to the Netherlands. You moved quite a lot between countries doing your academic career. Did you like it? Did you enjoy it? Are you comfortable in staying in another country? And would you feel like coming back at a certain point to Portugal for a professorship or something?
Yeah. So I really like this traveling part, because I believe that only when you get in contact with a different supervisor, a different group, colleagues that work in a different way, you actually grow. And if you keep in your own institution, you can be a fantastic scientist, but I think there are aspects that you are lacking, because if you are still working always with the same supervisor and the same team, You never put yourself at the test. And I like that part on challenging myself, and then add the chance to work in different groups and with different fantastic PIs that learned me a lot just for their dedication to work, different way of approaching science, and you always learn from these experiences. So that I definitely recommend to each one of us. I don't see it as a negative aspect in science. I actually see it one of the most fantastic aspects of science is that you manage to travel not just for the conferences but also to do a postdoc, to do an Erasmus program, so that it's a fantastic experience. You grow a lot with that. I believe I did. Maybe others should comment on this, but at least I believe I did. In terms of returning to Portugal, yes, of course, I would like to return at some point. Not now, but at some point, I would like to go back. Just because you have family, and then it's, of course, I can just identify a couple of advantages from Portugal comparing to other countries. But just I will stick to the family.
We won't comment on the Dutch food in this point.
Exactly.
And maybe a bit as a wrap up, can you think of maybe a role model that you had during your life, either as a kid, teenager, or maybe more in your adulthood, that brought you into science, or somebody that you thought you really wanted to, that you looked up to and really wanted to follow their steps, so that you were really impressed by them?
I don't. So I don't know how much I'm helping others when they will watch this movie, but I don't have a role model. But I do have colleagues that actually influenced me a lot on the way that I am today. And one, for example, was during my PhD studies. I had a professor that was already at the end of his career that just spent time with me for the sake of, this is a nice science exercise. I actually want to do the maths with you. I want to do this equation with you. I have time to do that. Just come, let's have a coffee and then talk about science. The rest we don't need. We don't need to talk about the number of papers that you have to publish. We didn't need to talk about where, just talk about science. And actually that I really enjoyed, because that is what makes me so dedicated to science. It actually to spend time with people and then try to solve problems and forget all about the rest. And that example of someone in the middle of Portugal that was just a whole professor that dedicated time with me. It was not one of the greatest PIs or the most well-known personalities in the field of regenerative medicine. That one actually marked me a lot. And somehow I try to bring that learnings on the way that I deal with my students, because it's, if you lose this contact with your team and the amount of time that you spend with them, I think you became even more isolated in this journey.
Thanks for that. Well, I think that's the definition of a role model as well, no? Somebody who's helped you out and who's helped build you who you are later on. So.
But it's not that big name that you say, oh, no, I want to be that fantastic PI that everyone knows. No, it's just a simple.
Most of the time, it's the most important thing is the human side, and it's thanks for sharing this. Thanks for your time and for your honest opinion and experience. And thank you once again.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot for the invitation.